Hello and welcome to this video about AIX and power migrations in PowerVS. IBM recently published a support article covering AIX and power migrations in Power Virtual Server environments. It's an excellent article that explains the recommended migration strategy and the overall process. As with most support documents though, it supports and focuses on the guidance rather than demonstrating every step, so we thought it useful to create a video that shows you some of these steps in more detail. We've created a series of videos that builds on the article by showing some of the steps in action, along with a few practical tips from real-world experience. And we encourage you to read the article alongside these videos. Think of this series as a practical companion that expands on the guidance with demonstrations and additional context. There's a link to the article shown in the visual. The support article, AIX and Power Migrations in PowerVS, addresses a scenario that many PowerVS customers will eventually face. As Power Virtual Server evolves and new generations of IBM hardware become available, customers running on older AIX workloads need to support a path to modernise their environments. Rather than treating that one as a large migration project, this article breaks it down into two distinct phases. The first phase focuses on the operating system. Specifically, it explains how to migrate an existing PowerVS virtual machine that's running an older release of AIX to a supported version of the operating system. The second phase assumes you've completed the operating system migration. It then explains how to move the now supported virtual machine onto a newer IBM Power hardware server within the Power Virtual Server environment. In the first video, we'll focus on upgrading the operating system, and in the second video, we'll focus on migrating the VM to a newer Power server in PowerVS. As we discussed, the first migration is an operating system migration. The goal is to move from an older release to a supported version of AIX. That's the bits highlighted in blue in the visual. The second migration is an infrastructure migration, where the virtual machine is moved onto newer IBM Power hardware within the PowerVS environment. Separating these two into two phases makes the process much easier to understand, plan and execute. In this first video, we're concentrating on the first phase. We'll prepare the NIM server and begin the operating system migration using NIM. The second phase, capturing and deploying the virtual machine onto newer Power hardware, will be covered in the next video. What follows in the next few slides will be the steps for verifying that the NIM server is configured and ready to support the migration, and confirming that the NIM client itself, which is the AIX VM, is also ready to be migrated to the next version of AIX. Before starting any operating system migration, I always like to spend a few minutes checking that the NIM environment is ready. It's a simple step, but it can save a lot of troubleshooting later. Next, we'll take a look at the NIM master and the NIM client. We're not going to go into a deep dive into NIM itself, but we'll look at the resources that are needed and verify they are available before starting the migration. If something is missing or incorrectly configured, it's much easier to find out now and make the changes before the migration has started. We'll review the NIM master, which is the new AIX 7.3 VM that was deployed through PowerVS, and we'll look at the existing AIX VM, in this case running AIX 6.1, that we're going to migrate to 7.3. We'll make sure that the required NIM resources are there, such as an LPP source and a spot, and any other resources that are required, such as additional disks and so forth, before we can start the migration using the NIM alternate disk migration tool. Okay, so we're in the PowerVS Virtual Server Instances panel. And we can see here we have our CG61 VM, which is our existing VM that we're going to migrate to 7.3, and we can see that the status is in warning. This is expected given that we're running an older version of AIX on this VM in PowerVS. We click on the VM and we can see some additional information relating to its configuration. We can see that it is running an AIX 6.1 boot image and is running on Power 9 hardware in Power 7 mode. We can also look at the storage and networking configuration, and we can see that it has two disks. One is the boot disk, and there is an additional disk assigned to this machine that we've needed to perform the AIX migration. When we click on networking, we can see that it has a particular subnet and a VLAN associated with it, 2215. We go back to the list of virtual machines. The next thing we can do is look at CG-NIM, which is the NIM server that we've provisioned here. And you can see that it's active, it's running AIX 7.3, and we'll use this NIM server to perform the AIX 7.3 migration for the CG61 VM. We can see it's running AIX 7.3 TL4, and it's running on Power9. And looking at storage, for this particular LPAR, we can see it has 3 disks, boot disk, and there are 2 additional disks that are used for NIM resources on the NIM server, which we'll look at in a moment. So we've also assigned those disks to this VM as well. If we look under networking, we again can see that it has a similar networking configuration to the existing CG61 VM, so the same subnet and the same VLAN. Go back to the list of VMs within PowerVS. And if we now flick over to the terminal session on CG61, which is our existing VM, we look at the OS level on the configuration for the LPAR. We can see it's running AIX 61 TL9, and as I said earlier, it's running on Power9 hardware. And if we have a look at the volume group configuration, we can see there's just one volume group, just root VG, and we can see there is 2 disks, HDISC0, one root VG, and HDISC1, which is not assigned, but which will be used for the migration process in a moment. And we look at the size of the disks for each one, we can see that they are both the same size, so they're 20 gigabits, 20 gig in size each, and that's important for the migration, which we'll explain later. And we can check that our application is running. We have a Java application that is running on this system, and that's our workload that is running on this older version of AIX at the moment. And we'll see after the migration that it also can run on 7.3 as well. Now we go to the NIM server, and we can look at the configuration for the NIM server next. We look at the AIX version, we can see it's AIX 7.3. We look at the NIM resources for the master, we can see the NIM server has been configured. And if we look at the software that's been installed on this NIM server, we can see that the required NIM file sets have been installed. And you can refer to the support document for details on how to install this software. We can see we've got the master file set installed there. And the volume groups, we have 3 volume groups. There's root VG and the NIM VG and a NIM ADM VG. The NIM VG contains resources such as spots and LPP sources, and the NIM ADM VG will be used for the migration of the client. And at the moment you can see it is also 20 gigabytes in size. It needs to be the same size as the disk that the client has assigned to it, which is also 20 gigabits in size. So we can see we have 3 5-channel disks that we've assigned through the PowerVS user interface to this VM. Next thing we do is look at the LPP source. So we already have an AIX 7.3 TL4 LPP source configured on the NIM server. And if we look at the spot resource, we can see that is also configured. So this is a 7.3 TL4 spot. So we need both of those resources for the migration process. If we list the standalone clients that are configured on the NIM server, we can see that we do have CG61, which is our AIX 61 LPAR that we're going to migrate. And we can see the details of that client are already configured and defined to the NIM server. And we can also successfully talk from the NIM server to the client using the NIM show log command. On the client we can see that NIMSH daemon is running, so that's how we're communicating with the NIM master over NIMSH. And we can also see that we can list the NIM resources that are available on our NIM master using the NIM client command. Okay, now that we've confirmed everything is ready from the NIM server side, let's start the migration next. Here's the NIM ADM command we'll be using. The -C option specifies the NIM client, which is CG61 in this case. It's the same as the PowerVS VM name. The -S and -L flags define the AIX 7.3 TL4 spot and the LPP source that will be used for the migration. -D selects the alternate root VG disk, HDISC1, and -J specifies that a cache volume group will be used on the NIM server to perform the migration. The -Y flag accepts the required software licenses. The -A flag adds a timestamp to each phase of the NIM-ADM migration that we can watch while the migration is performing. One of the biggest advantages of NIM-ADM is that it performs the migration on an alternate copy of the client's RootVG, so the system remains up throughout the process, and you only need to reboot at the end to activate the new OS. Okay, so we're going to start the NIM-ADM migration now. We're on the NIM master here, cgnim, and we run the NIM-ADM command. Now, NIM-ADM has a total of 12 phases. For the purposes of this video, we're not going to show you all 12. We're going to cut right to the very end, so we can make the video a lot easier to review. You can look at this information in the support guide as well. It'll show you the phases that it runs through. But it does take a while to run through this. So we're at phase 1 now, so it's cloning the existing RootVG to the HDIS1 on the client. And this process can take a little while, but the overall process probably take an hour or so to run, and you can see here it's now completed. It's at phase 12. The migration is done, so now we log on to the client again and run OS level, and we can see it still says that we're running AIX 6.1. That's expected because what we need to do is boot from the alternate disk. You can see the boot list has changed, and it is now pointing to HDIS1, which contains the AIX 7.3 migration that we've just completed. So we're going to simply reboot the system now, which we do with the shutdown command. And once the reboot is complete, we'll be on AIX 7.3, which we'll come to in a moment. So the reboot will take a few minutes, and if we watch our session here, you can see it's dropped, and we ping the public IP address of the CG61 VM. We can see it's responding again now, which means the reboot is complete. We can start our SSH session and log into it, and you can see it says welcome to AIX 7.3. OS level confirms that we're running AIX 7.3 TL4. It's the same system. You can see we have HDIS0 now is old RootVG, so that's the 6.1 version of the operating system that we could fall back to if we need to, and HDIS1 is now running AIX 7.3. We can restart our workload, so we run the script to start our application, which is the Java app which we had previously, and that starts successfully. So basically our migration is now complete at this point. Okay, so at this point our migration is complete, and just to give you a little more detail, you can refer to the support document for this as well, but basically NIM-ADM did a couple of things in the background. It looked at the current root volume group on CG61 and cloned it to an alternate disk, which was on HDIS1, and then copied the contents of that to the NIM server and performed the migration on the NIM server itself using its NIM-ADM VG. Once the migration to 7.3 was complete, it copied that information back to that HDIS1 disk, the alternate root VG, and then all we had to do once that was completed was reboot the system. So this is the advantage of using NIM-ADM, that all this could be done while the system is up and running, and also because we're using an alternate root VG, the existing root VG, the 6.1 root VG in this case, still exists. So if we have an issue, we can simply reboot on the old disk and fall back to the previous position and version of AIX that we had prior to the migration, which is a very robust process. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video. In this video, we looked at how we can upgrade an older version of AIX using NIM-ADM within the PowerVS environment, and how we can make sure that our application is up and running afterwards, and look at how we could fall back if we need to. In the next video, we're going to be looking at how we can take that same VM that's now been upgraded to 7.3 and move it to newer hardware within PowerVS. So for example, our system at the moment is on Power 9. In the next video, we'll show you how we can take that workload and move it to Power 10. As we know, AIX 6.1 will run on Power 9, but it won't run on Power 10. So how do we move our workload across? Well, we migrate to 7.3 first. The next thing we can do is then capture that VM, which creates an image, and we can then deploy that VM to newer hardware, such as Power 10 server within the PowerVS environment. This will be covered in the next video, which will take you through the steps on how to do that, and then to validate the migration has been completed successfully.